This may be hard to imagine, but back in the Victorian era of the 19th century, a dominant ideal of feminine beauty was to exhibit the symptoms of tuberculosis, then called consumption. Women spent a lot of energy, even that didn't have the disease, with makeup and starvation diets, appearing fragile and wan and thin and pale, with sunken cheeks and ruby red lips. Kind of strange when you think about it. But if you had this disease, then called consumption, you were not a happy camper. In fact, it was usually fatal. You'd wind up, typically, drowning in your own blood. Terrible malady. It had become epidemic in the 19th century. Early in the 1800s, cities of Boston and New York, for example, listed tuberculosis as killing about a quarter of those who died in those places. Very fearful, very horrible disease. Overcrowding, unsanitary conditions, poor circulation in cold climates and crowded, confined building spaces causes to spread fearfully. Now, the bacterium that causes this disease doesn't transmit between human hosts very easily. But those conditions, those environmental conditions, caused it to spread fearfully in those kinds of settings. In the world of art and literature, tuberculosis seemed to be everywhere, striking down some of the most prominent figures in poetry, writing, music. The poet John Keats is dead at the age of 21 from tuberculosis. The list goes on and on. Edgar Allan Poe, names you recognize as among the most prominent writers of that era. Stephen Crane, all dead very young. The Bronte children, all 6 of them, including Charlotte and Emily, died before the age of 40. You wonder what they might have produced had they lived longer. The works that they did put forth before this fearful disease took them down enough to cause them to be famous and to be remembered forever. It's a tragedy when you think about these diseases affecting such talented and remarkable people. Now, one of the reasons that the society thought that a woman should look like she has tuberculosis is the fiction that since so many artists and talented writers had the disease, that perhaps it had the effect of stimulating the mind, including sexual passions. Well, there's no scientific evidence for that. And ironically, when immigrant communities began to be afflicted with this so massively, the same people who were idealizing the symptoms of tuberculosis in the upper class began to use the incidence of tuberculosis in the poorer classes as proof that those folks were somehow inferior. In fact, anti-Semites got a hold of this and began to call it the Jewish disease. So the ironies abound, and the tragedy of the effects of this horrible disease, hard to fathom.